first poem that we read this week that I think could save America is from Don't Let Me Be Lonely by Claudia Rankine. And first, I just want to point out some of the people that she mentions in it. First, she talks about Cornel West, and basically, he was American philosopher. He's academic. He's an activist. Um, he was a prominent member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And she mentions him um, in the very first line, and it says, Cornel West makes the point that hope is different from American optimism. And really, I think that's one of the best lines in this poem, even though it's the first line, and like it's the most prominent line I think that she uses, um, because I feel like hope really is different from American optimism. I mean, you can have hope and be like a really negative, have like a really negative connotation on it, but
Berlin, the night was perfect.
when you have American optimism, you don't necessarily have hope. You like the two can coincide with each other, but the point is that the two are so different, and I think that you can be hopeful without being optimistic, but you can also be optimistic without being hopeful. I mean, there's really a fine blue line between the two, and I think that's the first point that she makes. She at the bottom of the first page, she says, "You don't remember because you don't care. Sometimes my mother's voice swells and fills my forehead. Mostly I resist the flooding, but in Bush's case, I find myself talking to a television screen you don't know because you don't care." I was around when George W. Bush was elected. I don't know if she's talking about the first Bush. I assume that she is because of the time period. The picture on the next page is 1998. So I would have been 4 years old at the time. So I can assume she's talking about the first Bush that was president, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but from what I recall, Bush was a Republican, and someone like Rankine, obviously, I don't think would find that he really like cared about America. I mean, like I said, I was around when George W. Bush was president, and I didn't necessarily like most of the things that he said. I mean, if I was old enough to vote at the time, it wouldn't have been for George W. Bush. Even though I went to an elementary school that was named after his mom. Whatever. But my point is that I think that she's trying to relate her mother and Bush together.
But when you sing, it gives me
because it's saying if you don't remember something, then you obviously didn't care about it. And I think that stuck out in this poem because it really is true that if you don't remember something, obviously you didn't care about it, because why would it stick in your brain if you don't care? She also talks she says something about Cornel West, that he says, "This is what is wrong with black people today. Too nihilistic, too scarred by hope to hope, too experienced to experience, too close to dead is what I think." That to me was also one of the most prominent lines, because I really think you can be too scarred by hope to hope, too experienced to experience, and she says too close to dead. Basically, if you're too scarred by hope to hope, it's basically like you've given up that hope. And if you're too experienced to experience, you're kind of numb to what's going on around you, which I think is why she mentions Mahalia Jackson. And if you don't know, Mahalia Jackson is one of like the greatest gospel singers. I know she was basically around from 1911 to 1972, but it was more prominent in like the 1920s to the 1970s. Something that I remember Mahalia Jackson saying was, I sing God's music because it makes me feel free. It gives me hope. With the blues, when you finish, you still have the blues. So I feel like it's kind of referenced in here to that saying that she says. Because I feel like Mahalia Jackson was also saying she was too scarred by hope to hope, or too experienced to experience. She didn't want to sing the blues because after you were done singing it, you still had the blues. So she wanted something that was so uplifting to people that it actually gave them the hope back that they were too scarred by. It says, perhaps Mahalia, like Paul, I think it's Chelan, I think, is how it's said, has already lived all our lives for us. And Paul Celan was a Romanian poet and translator. I'm pretty sure that's who she's talking about. I mean, that's the only Paul Celan I know of. But he was around during like the World War II era, and she just has so many different people that she's talking about, but they were all so prominent in their time era that I feel like she's really just trying to say that all these people that were so prominent, I mean, each of them had this hope. Like, if you're saying you've already lived all our lives for us, it's that they've already gone through all these things and they had to overcome so much that it's really like they've just lived everybody's life and they had to go through everything that other people have to go through. But and then she talks about, she says, then my father dies and I cannot attend the funeral. It is not possible. And she says, at night I dream about my replacement mourner, a woman. She has lost her mother years before, and because she's already grieving, she just continues attending funerals for a price. And I kind of wonder if you could do that. Like, I wonder if you could get someone to go to a funeral in your place. Like, that to me just seems like something. I know we talked about like the Semplica Girl Diaries. I'm sorry, I'm going all the way back to our short fiction unit, but I feel like when I read that, I was kind of thinking of the Semplica girls and how they just kind of stood there and were property pretty much, and they were just kind of there as like they were supposed to be like a decoration, and that's kind of how I felt that she meant this to be. Like the mourner was kind of just supposed to be a decoration, like, oh, this person's there to mourn, but they're doing it for me, so I don't have to do it, and I don't have to feel those feelings. Yeah, so I feel like this poem really could save America because it talks just about not just the pictures that are in here, and those really are riveting. Like, you really, hold it up. Like, especially this one at the bottom here, with the guy's face. I mean, you can't really see it on my camera that good. There you go. But honestly, that's one of the most riveting pictures because you can just tell in his face how sad and depressed he looks. And I feel like around this time era that she's talking about, that's how people felt all the time. That's must have how they felt all the time. Just like Mahalia Jackson. I mean, I basically think that's why she sang in the first place. I mean, it says Mahalia's genius is based on the collision of her voice with her spirituality, and I think that that's really true. And I think that people should read this poem not just because of the way it talks about the time period, but the way it talks about these different people and the way their lives played out. Not just her life, but the lives of others. I mean, when you string it all together, I think that it's just a really charming poem, and it was one of my favorites this week. So the clip that you're seeing right now on your screen is from Brother Bear, And I'm talking about this movie because I'm talking about the poem Animism by C.D. Wright. And basically, animism is the concept of plants and animals and inanimate objects all having souls. And when I was reading this poem, I thought about this movie basically because this movie is about a boy that kills a bear and then he gets turned into a bear by these spirits in the sky. And I really think that when I read this poem, I was thinking that it meant that you were supposed to respect nature. And I really got like a survival of the fittest vibe, especially when I read the line where one eats until one is eaten, never eat to be eating. And this movie, it's one of the best Disney movies, I think, because it isn't just talking about the circle of life, like in The Lion King. It's talking about how you really should respect nature and how until you walked a mile in their shoes, you don't know what they were thinking or what they were feeling or what was inside their soul. And that basically to me was what the movie was about, and this is the image that I got when I was reading this poem. I think it's really important that you see that nature is something that is supposed to be respected, and it's a really important part of our society. That's part of the reason I think that it should be taught in schools right now.